Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about how to take the foundation of DietPi on the Raspberry Pi that we've created in the previous video, and we're going to be using that to install Docker, Portainer, and a variety of other tools to further secure and make this installation of Portainer and Docker a little bit more hardened. All right, so let's get into it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get into the DietPi. If you're already SSH'd into the DietPi, you're one step ahead of the game. You can also just be connected directly in with a keyboard and mouse and using your DietPi with an external mouse and keyboard and monitor. And if you're at the command prompt, that's where we need to be. Okay, so now we're going to run DietPi-software. And we're going to launch the software browser launcher. We're going to go to search software, and we're going to search for Docker, and then we're going to press OK. All right, we're going to press the space bar to select the multiple options. We're going to install Docker Compose, Docker, and Portainer, all three. And then we're going to tab over to the confirm button and then press enter. And now we're going to go down to install and then tab over to OK. And it's going to ask us if we want to begin the installation of these three packages, which we do in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and just press OK. So now you can see here that we are going to be running the installation, core installation of Docker, Docker Compose, and Portainer, all running here from the software library, from the DietPi. And again, we're just letting it install, nothing fancy. We're installing it just straight up from the software library. All right, so we're just going to wait for that to finish. Alright, we're almost done here. As you can see, it's installing each package one by one. And we're just kind of going through the installation steps for each one. It's downloading and then installing. These are pretty small packages. All right, so now I have those three applications installed on my computer, and I am going to show you that I've already created a folder in my home folder called Compose. Now I'm going to remove this folder and just show you how I created it. I created it by typing in mkdir compose. And when you do that, it creates a folder called Compose. The ls command just lists the folders in the directory. All right, so what we need to do is we need to create a Docker Compose file. This Docker Compose file is the set of instructions that we will be using to tell Docker that we are going to be what we are going to be installing. In this case, we're going to be installing Portainer, and in order to do that, we are going to need to give this Docker environment a set of instructions. Now, I am plugged in to my Raspberry Pi, and I'm emulating this through a virtual monitor. So I'm just going to bring up another command prompt, and I'm going to bring that over here into the video screen, and we are going to SSH into my environment. And that is the internal IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Actually, it's not working, so let's check and verify the configuration by running DietPi config.
And let's go down to adapters, and let's just validate the IP address. So it's 192.168.64.3 back 64.3 192.168.64.3. Okay, let's try pinging that IP address. And I can ping it, which is great. And I'm going to now just attempt to SSH into it. SSH 192.168.64.3. Okay, it says that the connection has been refused on port 22. So let's just validate that I have the validate that I have the SSH software. It's actually set to none, so SSH server is set to none. So I'm going to go ahead and install the SSH server, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So that is why it wasn't working. So now again, it should be installed by default, but again, if you go to the software listing and you see SSH server is set to none, then you will need to click on that and then install an SSH server. And in this case, I am installing the Open SSH server. There are two servers that you can choose from, Dropbear and Open SSH, and I'm choosing Open SSH in this case. Okay, so it's installing, and then once it's installed, I'm going to SSH. And the primary reason why I'm going to SSH into the machine is to show you how to harden SSH near the end of the tutorial, but then also so that I can cut and paste information into the text file, which I can't do while I am using a monitor, mouse, and keyboard connection. So once we get SSH here set up and running, I'm going to create a file on the Raspberry Pi. So let's, okay, verification has failed, and it's because I have a known host already for this key. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit my known host file. And I see that I've got several. I'm just going to comment those out and see if that works. And I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to type in the password. All right, so now I am SSH'd into my DietPi. So now I'm connected into DietPi in two different ways. I'm connected in using the SSH connection and over here on the monitor emulated connection. All right, so if I do an ls, I can see my compose folder, and if I cd or change directory into the compose folder, I can see that it's just an empty folder. I am going to create a file, docker compose.yaml. This is the file where I'm going to install, or I'm going to set my set of instructions for installing Portainer. And again, it's easier to just cut and paste. All right, so let's go through the settings real quick. So this is version 3.8. That is the version of the settings that I am setting here. Services that I am installing are Portainer, and I am pulling the image from Portainer's direct repository. I'm setting the time zone for Portainer to the New York time zone, and I am using this internal network. Going all the way down to the bottom here, you'll notice that I have a network called internal, and I'm using the bridged driver, which means that I'm going to create a network and I'm going to share that network with the Raspberry Pi. I'm using port 29443 for both HTTP and HTTPS, and I am basically saying do not restart unless stopped.
Okay, we are also mapping some volumes, which is important. And we're basically saying, hey, the data folder at the root level of the Raspberry Pi is going to map to the data folder or the data volume within Portainer. So we need to create a data folder. So I'm going to save this by pressing Command and Control X and then answering yes. And I'm going to go back to the root level by typing cd / and I'm going to make directory mkdir data. And it says that the data folder has already existed. It already exists, and I created that folder earlier, so that's why it already exists, and there it is, data. All right, so I'm going to go back to my home folder, and I'm going to go back to my compose folder, cd compose, and now I'm going to start my Portainer instance, and you do that by running docker compose up -d, and what -d stands for is detached. So I'm going to be running this as a detached instance, meaning I don't need to be connected into SSH and running this command. It's going to run this environment without me needing to be consistently logged into the Raspberry Pi. All right, so it's telling me that there's already a instance of Portainer running, and that's true because when we installed Portainer using DietPi, it automatically created a container. So in this case, we need to remove that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do docker compose down to take down the system that we just started, and we're going to type docker rm-f and Portainer, there we go. And that's going to remove the default image that was created by DietPi. And now when I run docker compose up -d, it's going to automatically bring up and show me that the network internal has been created, and so has the container Portainer has also been created. So now I've got Portainer running, and I've got that running on my Raspberry Pi. Now to access my Portainer environment, all I have to do is open up a web browser and go to that web address. So it's 192.168.64.3:9443 for me. And we're going to want to make sure that I am putting https:// in front of it. And you'll notice that I'm getting a, hey, this connection is not private. Do you want to continue? And yes, I want to continue. I'm going to press show details, and I'm going to say, go ahead, visit this website. And there we go. We can see here that Portainer is running. And I've already set Portainer on this Raspberry Pi earlier, and so it did not ask me to create a username and password. So the volume was already existed. I'm going to log in with the account that I've created already, and we're going to see if it lets me in. Nope, did not let me in, so I'm just going to try the password manually. Okay. So I am now logged into Portainer, and as we can see here, we have a local environment connected and set up within my Portainer web environment. Now, HTTPS is not set up, it's not secured, and anyone can connect to my server. I'm only able to connect to this locally, which means that if I wanted to connect to this externally, I would need to open up a port on my firewall, or I would need to use a DDNS server, or I would need to use a VPN or a reverse proxy. There's lots of different methods that you can use to secure Portainer or to secure Snipe-IT, and I'll do a whole post around the pros and cons of opening ports using these different networking methods. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to be opening up ports on my firewall and then hardening the system so that if attackers do get through on the ports through the firewall and they are physically attacking the Raspberry Pi, we will have some mitigating steps on the Raspberry Pi to help block those attacks and those attempts. And we're going to increase the security of Portainer to ensure that the traffic is encrypted and to ensure that we are utilizing the strongest authentication possible. Okay, so let's get into it. First thing we need to do is click on this environment and click on the little tiny pencil. And as you can see here, I've already put in my public IP, which is container.johnbrown.org, which is the URL that I want to use for my web environment. Now, we need to pick an IP, we need to pick a domain because I want to use HTTPS. And in order to issue a certificate, we need to have a domain name. So if you don't have a domain name and you would like to use Portainer and Snipe-IT, you definitely should have a domain name. Subdomains are free, so if you have a domain, you can use a subdomain in this environment, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just calling it container.johnbrown.org. And I put that in there and I press update environment, and that updates my environment so it knows that it's going to be accepting requests from that inbound domain name. All right, so now I can go down to the settings area and we can scroll down to where it says SSL certificate. And as you can see, we have the ability to upload a SSL certificate and a private key, which we have not set yet because we need to configure that. So the first thing we need to do in order to configure that is to install a Let's Encrypt, which is a great utility that will automatically install CertBot and Let's Encrypt and give you the ability to create SSL certificates for your Raspberry Pi. All right, so we're running the Let's Encrypt installer now. And once that is fully installed, I'm going to go ahead and press yes. We are going to all right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to my SSH screen, and I am going to run a command. And what this command is basically saying is we are running certbot, and we're saying, hey, we're manually running this command against the preferred challenge, which is DNS. So we're essentially saying, hey, certbot, go to this domain and validate this domain using DNS settings. And the email address that we're going to be using is my email address, which is tied to the domain. And the domain, this -d flag here, is going to be wildcard, that's what the star stands for, .johnbrown.org. So I can use the certificate on anything that we set up on this Raspberry Pi. So we're going to use this for Portainer, and we're going to use this for Snipe-IT as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And what this is going to do is it's going to validate, or it's going to attempt to validate the domain. Now it's saying that there's already an existing certificate, and it's because I had ran through this earlier. And what you should normally see when you run this command is a prompt to enter in a domain verification code into your DNS record. So essentially it's asking you to type a text, create a text record, and then create that DNS validation, which I've already done. So I am going to keep the existing certificate for now because I've already have the certificate. And if you take a look at the /etc, so we're going to cd into etc, let's encrypt, and we're going to go into live. We're going to see that I already have a domain, johnbrown.org. I'm going to cd into that, and you can see all of my certificates here. So if I look at my certificate by pressing or by typing CAT full chain.pem, you can see here's my certificate. And if I do the same thing on the private key, it will show the certificate there as well. Now, the easiest way to extract this information is to take it. Yeah. I'm on a call. The easiest way to get this information out is to copy this into a text file and then save it to your local computer. So what you want to do is take this information and save it to a text file to your local device. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to open it up in a text editor. I'm going to go ahead and do new document and paste that in there and call it something like certificate.crt. I'm going to save it to my downloads folder. I'm going to use CRT, and there we go. I've already saved my private key, and again, for security, I'm not going to show the private key here on the video. All right, so now I've extracted the two certificates that are located in my Let's Encrypt folder, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload them into my environment. So here they are, certificate and private key. And I'm going to save my SSL settings here. Now in a new tab, I'm going to go to https://container, and what you're going to see here is that now this domain loads properly with my SSL certificate because I've loaded that SSL certificate from the previous step. So now I am on a pure play SSL, fully encrypted, fully secured connection. Now if I connect in over the private IP address, I'm always going to get a connection is insecure, but if I connect in over the public IP address, I am getting a connection is secured. All right, so if I log in now with my credentials and I go back to settings, what we want to do now is we want to make sure that we turn on HTTPS and make sure that we force HTTPS to always be on. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this one more time. All right. Unable, okay, no problem. I'm going to actually just log in over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. All right, so as you can see here, force HTTPS is already enabled, and I do have the valid SSL certificate, so we are good to go. All right, so now that we have Portainer fully secured and set up, we need to take some additional steps to ensure that we are adding extra layers of security. So let's go to settings and let's take a look at authentication. Now, by default, we have multiple layers of security. We have internal security for authentication. We have the ability to configure LDAP. We have the ability to configure OAuth with single sign-on. If you have the ability to use single sign-on, and I highly recommend that you do so. I'm going to be linking to a tutorial on how to use Microsoft Azure authentication with custom OAuth that gives you the ability to log into your environment with a Microsoft button, and it gives you just a little extra security, right? So now when people go to your environment, they are being redirected to your Microsoft screen instead of the default login screen. If you're going to stick with the internal, that's fine. I highly recommend that you drop this down to 1 hour, and I highly recommend that you drag this all the way over to 18 characters and then press save settings. That is the best way of securing the authentication at the web level for your Portainer instance. All right, so now we've got SSL and we've got authentication fully hardened on the system. Again, we'll have some tutorials on how to do single sign-on. So now we need to take a look at other layers of security. We still have SSH running on the Raspberry Pi, which is a huge target especially for people who are trying to brute force in. So what we recommend doing at this point is installing a piece of software called Fail to Ban. And what Fail to Ban does is it automatically installs a utility that will look to block any unauthorized SSH attempts. So if there's multiple brute force SSH attempts into the workstation or into the computer or at the Raspberry Pi level, it will automatically ban that IP address from attempting further logins. So it's a great tool, and you can monitor exactly how many people are logging in, or how many IP addresses, or how many failed attempts there are in what's called the Fail to Ban jail, and it will actually show you how effective this additional piece of security is on your system. So again, just install it, it runs, and it's great. So now that we've got Fail to Ban installed, the next step that we need to do is we need to change the SSH ports on SSH. Now, SSH hardening is its own set of is its own ball of wax, especially if you're using OpenSSH, which is what we're using. Highly recommend a bunch of different settings. At the minimum, you should change the port. At a maximum, you can disable logging in with the root account. You can disable the authentication with a username and password. You can enforce only authenticating with a private and public key pair. And what that means is a workstation will have a key, an SSL certificate on it, and the host, the Raspberry Pi, will have the other half of that key, right? So a public key and a private key. And when you are authenticating, those two keys actually create the authentication token instead of a username and password. So it's a much more effective and easier way of controlling who has access to what, because again, you're using keys and you can revoke those keys at any time. So it makes it much easier to control access. And then of course, changing the port. So in this video, let's go ahead and change the port, and the DietPi configuration is located in etc ssh d config and then DietPi conf. And all we have to do is add port, and I'm going to just pick a random port like 2525. All right. Okay, so now I've got that port completely changed. Now what we need to do is we need to restart SSH, or we need to restart the Raspberry Pi. So I am going to just restart SSH here, and I'm going to do that by running the following command. All right, so the command is sudo service SSH restart, and boom, it's just restarted. So now if I go back to my SSH and I exit and I attempt to SSH now, it will tell me that the connection is refused. But if I try connecting in over port 2525, it should allow me to connect. So let me just attempt that one more time. So it ports 2525. Oops, might need to do a flag. There we go. So -P2525, just telling this that I am coming in over a specific port. And I'm going to try again with my password, and I am now logged in, and again I am in over a different port with SSH. So again, lots of different things that you should be doing to harden your DietPi and to make sure that you have set up your environment in a way that's secure. So at this point we have Portainer installed, a graphical user interface for Docker. We have Docker installed. We've got Docker is running Portainer, which is running in a container within Docker. It's running over HTTPS. That HTTPS certificate is going to be automatically renewed with Let's Encrypt. And we have hardened our Raspberry Pi. We have installed Veil2Ban. We've changed the SSH ports. Of course, we've already previously changed our root password, and we recommend highly disabling root SSH and only allowing certificate key-based pair authentication. We will have links to other great tutorials on how to do those things in the blog post that is posted along with this video. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comments below. And if you like this video and you want me to see me make more of them, please go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. And thanks for watching.